Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 75.
As an artist and an educator, I know for a fact that there is almost nothing as important as allowing your child to be exposed to the arts in a successful way, for their self-confidence, for their ability to express themselves out there in the world, and because in many cases that is where your child wants to go to have his livelihood and to express himself in the world.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Stephen Horwich. He's one of our favorites on the Luminous Mind. He's been episode 40 and then 60, and then we have a Steve Horwich week. He's the developer of Connect the Thoughts. He's an ardent homeschool advocate, and he's written many articles and books about how to homeschool. So welcome, Steve Horwich.
Thank you again.
It's been kind of fun talking, but today we're going to discuss arts and homeschooling, how to get your kids involved in different kinds of arts, and then also we're going to talk a little bit about school sports. So where do you want to start with this conversation?
Oh, goodness. Let's start by separating it into pieces so people can think with it a little bit.
Okay.
And let's stick to art at the beginning, and then we'll move into sports and other activities that homeschoolers can participate in. There's lots out there.
These are the topics that we kind of discussed before I started recording, where it scares people off to homeschooling because, there are certain things that do require groups of children, and they don't want their kids to miss out on these things. And so we're going to try to give them ways
Yeah, you bet.
that they don't miss out.
My very favorite thing, and the thing I always created in private schools when I was teaching in private schools, was the arts department. And I would expend the vast majority of my energy putting a music program and a theater arts program there. To do theater arts, you need a group. It's very hard to do it alone. The smallest number you need to do any kind of a theater arts program is you, one other actor, and an audience. And yes, that can be done. And you can become educated in the area of acting and theater and performance and that kind of thing, even with a group that small, which we're going to talk about a little bit in a minute. But theater, plays, musicals, to do those things, you do have to connect up to a group to really do those things. I think we should get into that. But I'd like to cut it into two pieces, the arts discussion. One piece is the methodology that a homeschooler should use with their children. You, mom and dad, how are you going to approach your kids when working with them in the area of the arts? And the area of the arts would include things like creative writing, painting, singing, dancing, anything that...
Musical instruments, maybe.
Yeah, anything like that. Anything that is a personal expression through the means of art qualifies. There are ways to do this successfully. There is an approach that increases the likelihood that you'll succeed with your kids in teaching them art if you take it. And there is an approach that almost guarantees that you will fail with your kids in the area of the arts and even scare them away from the arts if you take that. And I'd like to separate out the way we teach art and discuss that. And then the second part of the arts discussion is, where do you find it? As a homeschooler, where can I find programs?
Especially if it's not your, forte.
Especially if it's not your forte. That's exactly right. Where do you take your children to have them have those experiences? Because, of course, the argument, as you and I were just talking about before we came on the air, the argument is, I don't homeschool because my child can't have that experience that he gets in school of a big art program, theater arts program, orchestra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are established, especially at the high school level. Now, I do have to say that I live in Los Angeles, and I graduated high school here in 1974. which makes me a very old man. And
that's the year I was born, by the way.
Oh, see, thanks a lot, Rebecca. Thanks a lot. That made my day.
But I do have brother-in-laws your age, so they don't seem old or anything.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take that with a grain of salt. But when I graduated high school, I was an award-winning director and actor in high school. I won an Emmy Award before I finished high school for a piece I wrote, directed, and played the lead in. I even wrote the music for it. But while I was still in high school, they were starting to shut down the arts programs in Los Angeles. They were closing down orchestras, they were closing down high school choirs, and they were starting to severely limit theater arts programs. The excuse they gave at the time, of course, in the mid-'70s and afterwards, was that there was no money. And the money that they had to be spent. This is always what schools cry about. There's no money. The money they had to be expended in core academic subjects like history and science and math. Well, as an artist and an educator, I know for a fact that there is almost nothing as important as allowing your child to be exposed to the arts in a successful way for their self-confidence, for their ability to express themselves out there in the world, and because in many cases that is where your child wants to go to have his livelihood and to express himself in the world. So it's all very nice and well and good to claim that some subjects are more important than others, but it's categorically not true. Every child is different, and for child A, junior may love math, and that may be his subject, and he may need a lot of math as he comes up through school. But child B may be a singer and an actor, and child C might be a writer, and child D might be a dancer, and child E might play piano, and these children deserve as much exposure to the area of expertise they're interested in as the kid who wants to or ends up in math or science or whatever.
Well, and by putting one subject above the other, I actually talked with another guest about that then you end up, like if you have to require everyone to have science, you end up with really poor science teachers anyway, because they're just trying to make sure they have enough classes to fulfill those requirements, not that somebody's really great at teaching that subject. And I would imagine that'd be the same. I mean, even if we flipped it to arts, know.
Yeah, it's absolutely,
if it's a required thing.
Mm-hmm. If you're talking about public schools, it's absolutely true that a teacher in any area is very unlikely at the junior high or high school level to have any expertise in the area they're teaching. What they have a degree in is education, as you and I have discussed before. They do not have a degree in science. They do not have a degree in theater arts. They do not have a degree in science in a particular area of science where they might be teaching. It's not to say there aren't teachers with some expertise in the public schools in the subject that they're teaching. There are some, but it's not very likely. And you're right, as an emphasis is placed in a certain area and more teachers are required, the level of expertise per teacher on average is going to drop in a public school district.
They say you need like 10,000 hours to be an expert.
In anything.
In anything,
That's right. Yeah, that's the average they claim. So as a homeschooler, we're looking for ways to, A, expose our children to various arts and allow them to acquire expertise, and B, to support that process as parents and even as teachers. And those are two different kind of subjects that I'd like to jump into. The quickest one to cover is how to teach in the area of the arts. Because you and I have already sort of covered it, so I'm going to keep it brief. My experience in teaching in the arts for over 40 years, working with thousands of actors and, thousands of singers and thousands of dancers over my career doing this kind of thing, is that there are two approaches to teaching, one that's disastrous and one that works. The disastrous approach is to critique. It's the critical approach to education. And in the area of the arts, to approach a student critically, look at their work, critique their work, grade their work, correct their work. That's the quick, direct road to getting a student to withdraw from that area, to hate everything about it and never want to do it again as long as they live. Which is not to say you can't improve a student's work. It's not to say that you can't give them information that will improve their approach to their work and continue to give them that information and perhaps give them the same piece of information 10 times until they digest it and use it. But what it does say is that if a student shows you the result of his work, hey, Mom, here's the piece I wrote. Hey, Mom, here's the song I've been working on or the dance I've been working on or the little piece that I directed with 8 of my friends in the backyard or whatever, here's the piece I learned on the piano this week. If they show you this work, and you certainly want them to, right, because you want to, as a parent, participate with that and enjoy it, the one thing you don't do, if you want them to continue to learn in that area or to share it with you at the very least, is critique it. If you listen to your child sing and you say, well, yeah, that was really good, Johnny, but your pitch was a little off in the 4th and 5th bar, and obviously you haven't learned how to read yet in terms of musical timing, so your quarter notes are being syncopated, and that's not what quarter notes do, and rack. If you do that enough, and it doesn't take much, it really doesn't take much, instead of doing what I'm going to ask you to do as a parent in a second, if you critique, your child will withdraw. He will stop presenting his work to you first, and then after that, if it continues, he'll withdraw from that area of the arts. He won't do it anymore, at least until he moves out and is on his own. He won't touch it because it's painful, and he'll take a loss every time he shares something in the area of the arts with you. It's very important to remember that an artistic work is personal. It's intimate to the creator. That person poured their heart and soul into it. They're giving you, it's a glimpse into their soul. This is who they are. And for somebody to then break it down technically, which is ridiculous unless you have an incredible amount of expertise anyway. But to do that is to really harm that child's reach for that art form. And,
now, are you just meaning just as a parent, or I've had my kids in acting or in music and stuff, and I have noticed that they take I just listen usually or just watch what they're doing. But if they have a mentor that they really trust, they actually ask, what did you think? Those are the types of mentors you want to find, or do you want to find somebody who doesn't critique?
No, depending on the age of the child, the younger they are, the less critique can be done. The thing is, when somebody brings me a screenplay and asks me to read it, especially when they're young, and I've had this many hundreds of times, where they bring me their short story, they bring me their novel, or they bring me a song they wrote, and they ask me to look at it, and then they ask me what I thought. Unless I say, well, you've written the great American masterpiece at last, the one we've all been waiting for. If I don't say that and mean it, or something similar to it, I'm inviting that student to despise me.
Yeah, then they will never trust your opinion again.
That's right. Now, I'll tell you when a mentor earns the right to critique a work of art that a child is presenting him. After the mentor has done what I'm going to suggest as an approach many, many times, and after the student has seen distinct improvements in their work and recognized it. When the student knows that his work is getting on ever more solid ground, that he's always getting better at expressing himself through the art form, he's always improving in his technical approach to the art form, he knows he's getting better. He can then swallow some limited critique. But it has to be positive critique, and I'll talk about that in a second as well.
And I think it's interesting. Usually the child knows the areas they have to work on anyway.
Yeah,
so
they do.
It's you don't have to say much.
Yeah, most people know when they, hey, I didn't sing very well. You don't have to tell them then, right? Because they know. Or, hey, I didn't do my best work up there on stage today. If they've been on stage a few dozen times, they start to figure out when they're on their game and when they're not. There are some exceptions, but you're right. Most people can figure it out. Here's what I would ask a parent to do as an approach to acting or teaching arts, or music, or anything in the arts. What I am recommending very strongly is that you take the approach of admiration in as opposed to critique for your child. When your child performs or shares his writing or anything in the area of the arts, and by the way, this is true in any area they study, history, science, if you want to keep your kid's love and you want him to trust you as an instructor, you'll do this. Admire the hell out of what they give you. Find something about it, because there's always going to be something that you can admire, something. Hey, you looked real good standing up there on stage. If that's the only thing the kid did right in your eyes, then compliment him on that and mean it. But if you can find 2, 3, 4 qualities in their work that you actually find intriguing or admiring, worth admiration, you should admire publicly the hell out of those things with no ifs, ands, or buts. You don't say, hey, this was really great, but, or, yeah, this was wonderful if you just improve. You don't do that, especially at the beginning of a child's experience in the arts. Just admire what they do. Then they'll start to reach harder for it. They'll want to learn more. They'll want to do more. And their work will improve all by itself without anybody telling them how to do it, because they'll push to improve their own work. And at a certain point, when they've done enough that they have some confidence in what they're doing, it might take a while. It depends on the student. Some students take a while to feel comfortable about the idea that they're going on stage and acting or singing or playing clarinet or whatever. They take some time, and they need a lot of positive reinforcement prior to any kind of critique, Even when I work with professionals who have been writers or actors for a very long time, when I look at their work and they ask me for critique, I always start out with the positives. I extensively cover the positives. I'm talking about 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who've been acting for 30 years. I'll say, hey, in that performance, you got this right. You got that right. You did the following 20 things right. They were great. You made me laugh here. That was great. Now, you could improve it a little bit by trying these few things. And in that way, I've earned their trust. I've earned their respect. They know I actually watched because I found things to admire. So I was paying attention, and I've earned their trust on that level. They know I'm really paying attention. And the critique then is earned. They'll listen to it. Will they do everything I ask them to do? Probably not. But they will listen to the critique. They will take some of it in, and they will change some of their work. I really suggest very strongly to parents or teachers who work in the area of the arts, especially with children, that you really lean towards admiration as your approach and stay away from critique, especially with younger kids. They don't need it. They don't want it. An 8-year-old does not need you to tell him that his writing isn't the equivalent of Hemingway. It's unnecessary. You know, we all know that. He even knows that in his own mind. But what he needs from you is for you to tell him how wonderful his writing is, all the wonderful things you see in it. And keep doing it and keep doing it until he can stand on his own 2 feet, look you in the eye and say, no, really, is there anything not optimum about this piece of art? And then if you have the expertise, you can offer them a positive critique, which is never to tell them what's wrong with it. It's only telling them how they can improve it. You never harp on what they got wrong. Hey, you sang this note wrong. That isn't how you do it. You say, you know, if you get your breathing right, you'll find these phrases are easier to carry and your pitch will be more consistent. You stay on the positives. You stay away from the negatives when you teach. That's true with adults, and it's doubly true with children. So that's the methodology that I really, when parents do it, it works, and when they don't do it, they're sorry.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, like I said, I think it's best to find a mentor, because if you don't really know what you're talking about, you don't have any credibility with them anyway in that area. So, but
there's also curriculum. You know, we're going to talk about where to find the help, right, in the area of the arts. That's the next part of the discussion. There's curriculum. There are teachers. There are schools. There are all kinds of ways to get help, even on the internet now, in almost every area of art. And yeah, finding a mentor is good if the mentor understands what I just told you. They understand they're dealing with a kid and they approach them in a non-critical way.
So when you find a mentor, you really want to watch just to see how they go about doing that, and yank them from a mentor that would really hurt their love or desire for. That's actually not a mentor. That's not what we call a mentor. But
it's not a mentor. It's a sadist.
Yeah.
I've seen teachers working with kids who were treated them as if they were the corps de ballet and should have known absolutely everything about their art form. Any teacher who doesn't understand that the person in front of him, who's a student, does not know the field, does not know the particulars, does not know how to do it. If the teacher doesn't get that and treats that student as if they should already know everything a professional with dozens of years of experience and training knows, that's not a teacher, that's an idiot. And it's somebody who's going to do real harm to that child. And that's true in science, it's true in history and math, and it's absolutely true in the arts. You can just scare the hell out of a child away from the arts by giving him a teacher, a little martinet, who insists on perfect form, in dance with a 5-year-old. My goodness, what a waste of everybody's energy and time, guaranteeing that child will never study dance again.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So where do we find places to do stuff like this?
I've been doing tons of research on that kind of thing over the last 4 or 5 months in particular, because I write a newsletter through my curriculum, and every month I list various resources that are available in different places across the country. Here's what I'm finding. First of all, if you're looking for independent teachers, mentors, or you're looking for small independent schools like a music school for kids, young kids, or music teachers who specialize on kids of a certain age as singers, as musicians, or if you're looking for a dance school, or if you're looking for an acting program, they're readily available in almost every community in the United States. They're so easy to find. You absolutely do not need to take recourse to the public schools, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But you can, even if you are homeschooling, use your public school as a resource for theater arts and music programs. And I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. But you don't need them, and frankly, you may not want them. So most Parks and Recs programs, almost all Parks and Rec programs, have theater arts programs. They almost all have theater art classes oriented around younger kids or older kids. There's usually different programs in every city that I've ever looked at. And you sign your kid up, and the amount of money involved is negligible, $100 for a semester or something like that. And now your child is with a theater arts program that will do a full play at the end of 20 weeks or a full musical at the end of 20 weeks. So the Parks and Rec thing is an easy way to start plugging in, because it's in almost every city from what I can see.
Yeah, even in little places like my town.
Yeah.
And in fact, I wanted to hear why you would suggest the public school, because I really think that, when I've looked at arts, I think the best teachers that I found are outside of that.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. I've seen some good teachers in public schools when I was in public schools, but they're gone now because the arts programs have been weeded out.
Yeah. They've been cut and slashed.
Yeah, so they don't have anybody anymore. The only reason I brought up the public schools was that, folks, you're all paying taxes. We're all paying taxes, right? And if you're homeschooling, you're still paying taxes that help pay for the schools that other kids go to, your kids don't use. Yeah. Rebecca and I were talking about this just before we came on, how irritating as a homeschooler that is, that you're paying taxes so other kids can go to bad schools, while you, in the meantime, still have to pay to homeschool your kid. You still have to put out whatever money is required for that.
You double pay for education, and then they say that you don't like children, or you're not a supporter of education, even though you pay double.
You and I have had that discussion. What I was going to say about the arts programs is that most public schools, particularly junior high and high school level schools, middle schools and high schools, they have a situation where if you're homeschooling and you're in their district, you can sign up for their arts program and use it. So you can sign up for the band, or you can sign up for the music program, or you can sign up for the choir if they have one, or you can sign up for the theater arts program if they have one, and you bring your kid to the school during just that period of the week or those 2 periods of the week, and your child participates in that program. So you're actually very often not pushed out the door just because you're not into public education. You can still very, very often utilize public schools' massive facilities because, oh man, they have the best facilities, the best theaters, the best instruments, because they have all the money. They have your money. So you should take advantage of that if you are interested in having your child connect up to those programs. They do not have to take any other courses at the school, just the art stuff.
And in my experience, it wasn't as scary as what I thought. I think years past, they were a lot more irritated by homeschoolers coming in, but it's such a growing population. They love those kids.
So homeschoolers are better socialized and better educated, better at communicating as a group. And an art teacher loves that.
Well, they study it. They study that art. That was my son when he was in orchestra. He was the one that practiced, and the teacher was just blown away. And he got all the solos and anything that required.
And that's as it should be. Yeah, it's as it should be, right? He's in that age group. The program should be available to him because you paid for it. If he performs and he's the one who comes through, then he should get the perks, the solos and the rest, of course. So I think, folks, you will find that if you are really not willing to do much homework and don't want to get very creative about creating an arts program for your kid, that your local school district will do that for you. If you go and you talk to them, they'll sign up your kid for just that program. That's the only time he'll need to be at the school, and you can take advantage of it.
Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors. Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you are probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net. Get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Stephen Horwich, a homeschooling advocate.
However, generally speaking, small private institutions like music stores and dance studios have more specialized teachers. They're more qualified to teach in the area of the arts. And it is a better place to take your child. It will cost you some money, whereas the public school will not. Private lessons and even lessons in a class can cost some, you can start to get into some real money. Usually dance classes are between $5 to $12 a piece in most parts of the country. Sometimes more, never less than that, but sometimes more. And that's for all kinds of dance classes and for different age groups. Every dance studio I've ever seen had classes for young kids, classes for teenagers. They all have it. And they all have classes in jazz dance. They all have classes in, unfortunately, ballet, which I do not actually suggest many children do because it deforms the legs and the feet. And
definitely have a decent teacher on that.
Yeah, you have to have a great teacher who understands that's a very young body in front of them. And really limits what they're forced to do on point and stuff like that.
Well, and if you want to start a homeschooling group, and maybe you were going to talk about this, I think maybe you could go to some of those music stores and actually specifically advertise for that. Because just in my experience, when my son did the public school, and then we went we have like a leadership academy that's just homeschoolers, just the quality of the children that were there and the pieces that they were playing was well above where his high school, and this was a group of varied ages of children. So some of these kids were not even like 10 years old, and they were playing violin and stuff better.
You sound like my book now, the homeschooler handbook I was telling you about.
Yeah.
I about all of that in great detail in that book. That's exactly right. In a private school, in a little, like a music store or a dance school, they'll throw kids together based on their ability rather than their age. So you could have an 8-year-old who plays piano like a monster, and 14-year-olds trying to catch up. That's perfectly fine. The idea is to provide everybody a chance to move at their own pace and to, get involved in that art form to the best of their ability.
And surprisingly, when it's a mixed age like that, you find less bullying than you would in a public school.
Yeah, no, you don't find any bullying in private education, in a small private school like that or a dance school. It's very rare that any bullying. It's not school. It's not the same thing. But there's more to what you just said. So let's say you form a homeschool group. Most homeschool groups are going to consist of at least